So
Yeah, I'll go mute.
Thank you. I almost forgot. Yeah,
okay. We, again, as I just said, we are starting with chapter 5, verse 6. That's where we're going to be starting from. We've been discussing the beginning of this chapter, the beginning of chapter 5, in which King Solomon's basically been addressing, the main point that he's been addressing has been the approach to holiness, the approach that a person takes towards making moves in a holy direction. And what he's been telling us consistently throughout the past 6 verses, because it really started with the last verse of the last chapter, what he's been telling us consistently is take it slow, know what you're doing, be premeditated with what you're doing. Make sure that you understand what you're doing and what you're taking on to yourself also. And that was really what we saw a lot last week with the discussion of the nidarim, the oaths that a person takes. And thank God I actually got quite a bit of great feedback from a number of members of the group that it was a good reminder to take care of some things that you committed to doing. And I was glad that we could do that. And that's what King Solomon says. And what we were understanding was his main point is, if you break it down, you have to action. It does a lot more than words. Words are important; they have a place, but action's the best. In fact, if you could even get to action with avoiding the words entirely, with avoiding putting yourself in a precarious situation of taking a neder, taking a vow, so then you're much better off. So as he says, it's better, and that's again one of these cases where he's used the word tov, one of these, a number of cases we've seen so far where he's used the word tov. It's better for a person to never have sworn, to never have taken the oath, than to take the oath and not fulfill it. And so in that sense, we understand that taking the oath is less of a is kind of the less desired option. Better to just do the action. Okay. And I'm going to, I forgot to do this, so I'm just going to place in the chat quickly over here. Once again, as we always do, that is our link to the website. If you'd like to catch up on any videos or review anything, it's all there. So please join us then, or please check out the website if you'd like to. Okay, so we are going to continue this week with chapter 5, verse 6. And my belief actually is that verse 6 is really the last verse on this concept, on this idea that he's talking about. Soon after verse 6, he's going to go back to, discussing society as a whole, as he's been doing in the past couple chapters. He's been discussing in general the idea of society and what breaks it down and what builds it up. So he's going to go back to that in the coming verses. But first, he just has to finish off the last point. That's going to be verse 6. So without any further ado, let me jump into the share screen. Okay. And there it is. So give me 1 second to get my screen set up. Okay. And here we are. We are, again, this is chapter 5 and verse number 6. Okay. So again, the last thing that he said was, the very last thing that he said was, why put yourself in a situation by jumping to speech, by jumping to a neder, to an oath. He said, you're putting yourself in a very dangerous situation. You now may have to answer for your actions in a place where there really was no obligation in the first place. You did not have an obligation to take a neder at any point. But by a person taking a neder, they've now put themselves in a situation where they have to go, or may have to go and answer to Hashem why they didn't do that. Or even worse, to potentially put them in a situation where punishment may be forthcoming. Again, I'm avoiding the subject of punishment in general, but just to know that's there. Okay? So that leads us to verse number 6, and where he says like this. And this is an interesting case where you're going to find the word key used in 2 different senses. Actually, the Talmud already points this out. The word key has 4 different meanings. So depending on when you use it in the context, it can mean different things. So this verse is going to be a great example of that, where we have the word ki showing up in two different contexts. So number one is ki verov chalomot v'havalim udvarim harbe, because it is with many dreams and hevel, right? These futilities or things that are mostly useless, and lots of words. That's what fuels everything we've talked about. Dreams, hevel, and lots of words. Ki et ha'elokim yira. And again, this is the word ki being used in a different sense. Here the word ki means rather the God he shall fear, or the person shall fear. Okay, so let's read that verse again. Ki virov chalamos v'havalim udvarim harbe. Because what was the fuel? What was the initiative behind the last cases? Is because it's being fueled by dreams, hevel, and lots of words. However, ki et ha'elokim yira, rather a person should fear God. Okay, should fear God, and that's important that we have the word yira there, to fear, as opposed to some other emotion. Now, as it is with fear of God, you run into a couple problems. How do you fear something that you don't really understand? What is the fear of God? There's a lot of discussion on that topic, and it's really kind of beyond what we're going to discuss right now. But I do want to point out that it does say that we're looking for fear, and we're going to discuss why fear over a different emotion. And just so you also know, this is this end of the verse here is almost a mirror of the final verse in Kohelet, or the second to last verse in Kohelet, where it also says ki eta elokim yira, that God is to be feared. So we're going to see this is definitely a theme of Kohelet, without a doubt. But there's probably going to be some level of mirroring about what the explanation is over there and over here. We're not up there. We won't be up there for a while, but just to keep in mind. So he says, again, when it comes to inspiration, when a person feels the inspiration, feels the need to come closer to God, he's basically warning us that when that happens, you have to question what is your motive for doing that. Why does a person feel the desire? Now, of course, a person should feel a desire to become closer to God. That is definitely something that we are pro in the Jewish religion. We do want people to want to become closer to God, and we want them to continuously be on a path of growth. But at a specific time, I mean, when we're talking about a jump, when a person makes a jump in their relationship with God, it is important for a person to ask themselves, what is their motivation behind it? And that's what he says, and many times, right? Again, that's this word berov, with many. That could either mean with many of the things following, but could also mean in many of the cases, it seems to be fueled by these three things. Number one is chalomot, that's dreams, and that's kind of obvious, right? People dream for something great, better. Then you have havalim, are these, again, we don't like to use the word futilities because I don't believe that's a great translation, but these havalim, and finally dvarim harbe, lots of words. And we've seen so far already a number of times that King Solomon is very cautious, particularly in this chapter so far we've already seen. He's cautious with words, because when a person is just talking and talking and talking, a lot of things can come out that aren't necessarily what a person means to say. And that's why, again, when we're talking about a neder, for example, somebody jumps to the extreme move of taking on a vow. That can happen from one of three reasons. Number one is it's a dream. A person has a dream for something to happen. They have a personal dream, personal goal. So they want to make that happen. They want to solidify that with the power of a neder. Okay, that is something. And again, none of these three things are necessarily bad things, but they are motives that we have to at least question. Let's put it that way, right? So you have dreams that a person was dreaming for a better future. So of course, you do want action to happen, and you do want to have some level of solid growth or quantifiable growth that you can measure. So definitely, a dream is a great thing to have and an important thing to have. But is it enough of a motive to take the step that the person wants to take? Same thing with havalim, right? So a hevel we've discussed Hevel many times already. It's something that's basically unaccomplishable. With enough work, with enough labor, a person can eventually reach the goal of the Hevel, can distill the steam, as we've talked about. They take the steam and you can distill it to water when you have the right tools, when you have the right situation, when you do enough work, you can do that. So if that's your motive, then you really have to be questioning, is this something that I can even accomplish? If I'm going to be making a jump, making a new step, that's something you really have to weigh out and figure out, is this something that I'm ready for and up for? Right? We have to always be questioning, why we want to grow. Don't question to the point where you don't grow. That's an opposite thing. He's not discussing that over here. But it is worth questioning, what is the motive? And finally, again, there's this dvarim harbe, these many words, just an overflow of words that can be detrimental and lead a person to something unproductive. So those are three potential motives that a person may have. Rather, so if you find yourself in this way, in this sense that you're reaching towards God with one of these three motives and you realize you're in the wrong place, then what is the right way to reach to God? How do we attempt to commune with the divine? That is something that's a little different, quite a bit difficult. So rather, he says, what is the rather? And again, that's this word key being used in a different context. Here, key means rather. Rather, God should be feared. And I think he specifically mentions fear over here. And that's for the basic reason that fear is a fear of God. Now, fear of God, again, it's a whole discussion what fear of God actually means. Does it mean respect? Does it mean actual fear, as in like shivering at the thought of God? That doesn't sound necessarily so helpful. And okay. So the question would be what exactly fear means. But one thing is for sure, fear is a much more stoic, much more serious emotion, as opposed to something like love. Love of God, we're not to be putting down love of God at all. Love of God is very important. In fact, we often, in our literature, we understand love of God to be a higher level than fear of God. But when a person's in those initial steps of making new strides in their service of God, it's probably better for them to be using the emotion of yirah, of fear, because fear helps a person make sure that they're doing things for the right reason. They're doing things because they truly have this desire, not because they're just emotional about it, but actually if they step back and take their emotions out for a second, they say, is this a good idea or not? Should I be making this move or not? And that's a growth that is much more likely to have to last. When a person questions why they're doing what they're doing, and then makes a rational decision, comes to a rational decision about that they should make that move, then that is something that is going to have a lasting effect. And that's basically the key issue over here. With everything we've talked about, with the case of the neder, or the person running into the temple, or somebody's overcome with emotion to the point where they jump to new levels that they're really not able to attain. The problem is that it's a passing feeling. It doesn't last necessarily. It's something that comes and goes. That's why he says over here, rather, what's the way that a person should go? A person should rather use the tool of yirah, of fear of Hashem, fear of God. And that's something that, again, will allow them to take a more rationalistic approach to their growth and in service of Hashem, in service of God, or just growth as a person in general. Let's say if a person wants to grow, it would be much better for that person to do it coming from a sense of yirah, of fear, as opposed to just inspiration or a fire lit inside of them. Okay, so I think this is kind of his cap on this discussion. It's a very short discussion. It's only been 6 verses, or 7 verses actually, because counting the last verse in the last chapter also. So it was just a quick kind of side note that he wanted to bring out, that it's important when a person is approaching new levels. A person should always be growing and always be searching for more ways to commune and to come closer to God. But when doing that, it has to be done very carefully. It has to be thought out, has to be done slowly. Now, again, not to the point where you're moving backwards or not moving at all, but slow incremental growth has to be done with a level of questioning yourself and the reasons why you're doing it. It has to be done without extreme measures such as a neder or things like that. You want to really question every move that you make, but again, keep moving forward. That's again one last kind of idea that he's saying with fear God is that that itself is in and of itself a motive, a reason why a person should be moving forward. A fear of God, again, whatever that means, we'll put that to the side right now. But a fear of God should be motivating a person towards growth, but it's a growth that is slow and done decisively, as opposed to jumping in with 2 feet, running in the temple, as he puts it earlier. Okay, so that again is the verse 6. I'll read it in Hebrew one more time. Ki v'rov chalamot v'havalim udvarim harbei. This is done. All these things are usually done with many dreams and hevel, this hevel, and lots of words. Rather, ki et Elokim yirah, rather a person should fear God, and that is a much more realistic and rational way to approach God. Okay. Again, I don't want you to walk away thinking that emotion has no place in the service of God, or that a person should not be looking to grow. A person should always be looking to grow. It should be done with emotion. Absolutely, emotion has its place. But when you're making the final decision of whether I should take the next step, you have to do it rationally and take emotion and just hold it to the side for a second and think reasonably why you're taking on the next step. So with that, he's going to now move back into his larger general discussion of society. And it's kind of funny how the question of happiness, how we achieve happiness, has morphed into a larger discussion of how society grows or is torn down. But this is going to be a great example of another way that we find it. And it's actually, we're going to be running into some very famous verses over here, verses that are not just famous in the Jewish world, but they're just well-known verses or phrases that people use around. So they come from here. We're going to see that coming up in the coming verses. So, all right. So with that, we will begin verse number 7 over here. Again, that's chapter 5, verse number 7. And he says like this: Im oshek rush, v'gezel mishpat. If you see, it doesn't say if you see, but if it happens to be that the poor are being oppressed, v'gezel mishpat, and there is theft in the justice, v'tzedek, v'gezel mishpat v'tzedek, and there is theft. There is this some level of thievery going on in the justice system. And the mishpat is one form of justice. Tzedek is righteousness. So that they go hand in hand. Tirav Hamedina, if you see that in the country, in the society, al titma al hachefetz, do not question the matter. Ki, because, that's the word ki again. Here it's because, like it usually means. Gavoah me'al gavoah, there are higher ups over the higher ups. Shomer, who are watching. Ugvohim alehem, and there are even higher ups than them. Now that is a convoluted verse, and it took me a lot of tries to figure out how to translate this verse. Luckily, I did find a translation that was satisfying. A lot of the commentaries over here go with like this disjointed explanation, which we'll discuss what they understand. I'm going with a kind of more simplistic, or how it reads better to me, and fits in the general scheme of the verses. So we'll see that as I explain it. But let's translate it one more time. And I'm sorry, the first time I put the commas in some of the wrong places as I was reading it. Now I have it a little straighter. In Moshek Rush, if you see if the oppression of the poor, the gezel mishpat v'tzedek, and theft in the justice and the righteousness, tir'ev amedina, if you see those things in the society, literally in the country or in the state, al titmah al chefetz, do not question the matter. Ki gavoah mi'al gavoah, because there are higher ups over higher ups, shomer, who are watching, ugvohim alehem, and there are even higher ups on top of them. Okay. So first, let me give you the explanation that a lot of the commentaries go with, and that is to say that if you see in the country, in the state around you, that there's just this oppression to the poor and people are not being taken care of by society, don't be concerned with the fact that it's going on, because over everything there is God watching and ready to mete out justice. That's basically how a lot of the commentaries explain it. Again, what their understanding is, if you see oppression going on in the country, don't be concerned by it, because you could just know that justice will be served, which is absolutely true. We definitely know that that's true. We definitely find that justice is normally, again, can't say 100% of the time, but very often you will find that the wicked eventually do fall. Whether it's directly the wicked themselves or in their lifetime, or whether it's the systems that they build up after they pass away, whatever it is, hopefully, usually, we at some point we get to see the failure of the wicked. Not always, though. I will admit that it's not always visible. There are plenty of times where we've seen bad people do things and it just sticks and it just lasts. At the end of the day, Hitler did kill a lot of Jews, right? However many millions of Jews that he killed. And at the end of the day, Stalin killed even more of his own citizens, and Mao killed even more of his own. So there's definitely, and we're still actually waiting to see the downfall of the Chinese, right? We've seen at least the fall of the Soviet Union. We've seen the fall of the Third Reich. We haven't seen that one yet. So that's what I'm saying is, I wouldn't say it's 100% of the time. We can assume, knowing that there's scales of justice are really upstairs in heaven, that it's being taken care of by the one above, right? So that's what these commentaries are saying, is that the sense of this verse is, when you see oppression, when you see a failure of justice that's going on in the state around you, don't be worried, because just know it's going to be taken care of, right? While as high up as those people think they are, there's one higher above everybody else, right? So that's, for example, the Purim story. And when we see Haman, he goes and he's raised to high levels by Achashverosh, and eventually we see his downfall. His downfall actually came very quickly. So we got to see it very quickly, and it was a clear miracle, at least to us. But as I said, that's not always the case. It's definitely not always so visible, and it's definitely not always so. I don't know if you could say it happens 100% of the time. Again, I don't doubt God's justice. I know that He takes care of all that needs to be taken care of. But it is hard for me to understand the verse this way, because it's saying don't worry about it. But 2 chapters ago, he was very clear to us that when you see oppression around you, you can't be silent. You can't back away. You can't not do anything. You have to do something. You have to work, and you have to stand up. You have to make some moves against wickedness around you, particularly when it's systemic and around you in the entire state. That's something that a person needs to rectify. It's, as he mentioned, it's one of his paths to happiness, personal happiness. Now, that's obviously not the only reason why a person should do it, but it is a factor. So it is. That's why it doesn't sit well with me to say, don't worry about the oppression you see around you. He himself didn't say that recently in the past two chapters. So that's why I want to go with a bit more of a simplistic understanding of the words, and I think it actually fits a little better with the sense of the coming verses. And that is, let me read it to you once again, with a little different flavor. Okay, Im oshek rosh v'gezel mishpat v'tzedek tirev hamadina. Okay, if you see these things, again, the oppression of the poor, rosh is a general term, not necessarily for poor as in poor, strapped for cash, but poor as in downtrodden. Okay, we consider somebody who has passed away also to be a rush. Same word is used in another location where we say that they're poor in the sense that they have no abilities. So it really means anybody who's marginalized or underprivileged. So if you see the oppression of the underprivileged, and the a sense of thievery that's going on in the systems of justice and righteousness. And if you see that going on in the society around you, in the state itself, right? Medina again is the state, like Medina Israel, the state of Israel. So that's the same word. If you see that going on in the state, al titmah ala chayfetz. Don't question why that's happening. You know exactly why it's happening. In other words, it's very clear why that happens. And the answer is because what basically, let me take one step back before I read the rest of the verse. We can so often look around and see something that's just a terrible reality, something that even a systemic or statewide issue that is just so terrible and no one takes care of it and no one's working to fix it. And the answer is very simple why that is. Ki gavoah me'al gavoah shomer. The one who is above, who's supposed to be running the show, well, he's got somebody above him who he answers to. And he's able to pass the buck to the higher source, right? You go to your city council and you say, "Hey, we want you to take care of this issue in our city." And they say, "Well, that's really a county issue." They go to the county and they say, "Really, got to talk to the governor about that one. That's really beyond us." So whenever you have this system of bureaucracy where every person you go to says, "Oh, there's a higher up. You'd have to talk to my higher up about that." Well, that's why you should have no question about why oppression is occurring, why there is thievery in the justice system. And then not only that, there's the higher up has his higher up. And then ugvohim alehem, there's even higher ups above them. So no matter what, there's always somebody to pass the buck to. And that is, I think, what he's going to be talking about over here. He's now going to be discussing some power dynamics. And we're talking about a relatively civilized society, right? There's a system of bureaucracy. Well, great. That should be a sign of some level of civility of civilization. But that's not what he says. He says, when you see that, don't be confused when you suddenly find that there's oppression to the thank you, Yosef. I would ask you what you mean by that. I'm curious why you say that. But whenever you see, I guess the buck stops here. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The buck stops here. Yeah. I mean, if you have a leader, well, we're going to actually see in the next verse. He talks about the highest up, and we'll see how that plays out. But whenever you find a bureaucracy, don't be surprised when there's oppression. Don't be surprised when things don't get done, particularly things that actually have to be taken care of. When people are being put in pain or through real struggles, keep in mind that there's a reason why that's happening. No one's there to take care of it. Each person is able to pass it to the person above them. And I did find this translation, by the way, expressed in one of the sources. So this is not simply my own translation. This is also, there is a source to this translation, this understanding of the verse. So in that case, I think this actually, the words read much better. If you see this going on in the state around you, he uses this term again, al titmah ala chayfetz. Don't be surprised. Tamu'ah means surprised. That's that shorish, that Hebrew root word means surprised or flabbergasted. So don't be surprised when you see that, because you're going to find that each person that you go to resolve the issue has somebody else that they could pass it on to the next. They could pass it on to the next person, and eventually nothing ever gets taken care of. I mean, you look at our current bureaucracy, and every societal issue has got 5 different government organizations trying to fix it. I was recently filling out my ballot. I was blown away. This is the primary ballot that came to my house recently. And I was just, everything in Portland is homelessness. And every party and every group has another answer for homelessness. And the county has an answer for it, and the city has an answer for it, and the state has an answer for it, and the school district has an answer for it. Everybody's got an answer for homelessness, right? That's when you know nothing's going to get taken care of, right? When everybody's coming with their pitchforks or their pickaxes, I guess, to try and get at it all at once, that's when you know nothing's going to happen about it. That's just the reality. And that's what he's saying over here is if you see this, don't be surprised when you see oppression going on or failure of the justice system. You know exactly why it's going on. It's because each group is able to say, not my job. It's not my job. It's somebody else's job. Okay. They'll campaign on it being their job, by the way, you notice, but it ends up not being their job once they're actually in the situation. And he continues the same thought with verse number 8. So let's get to that. And this is where, again, as I mentioned before, to respond to Yosef, where you have, now we're talking about the highest up, right? So, okay, great. In a bureaucracy, you're thinking to yourself, in a bureaucracy where you have, a whole bunch of government programs, systems, of course, what if you have a king? A king's going to take care of everything, right? One dictator should be able to just wipe out all the issues, right? To that he responds, and this is, by the way, King Solomon is a king, right? So he should know, he's going to know better than anybody else how well a king can function on this matter. And he says, V'yitron eretz bakol hu. Okay, here we have another one of those cases where it's written one way and read a different way. It writes it in the feminine, and instead it's read in the masculine for whatever reason that is. I don't have an explanation on this one why that is. And he says, V'yitron eretz, the power or the overarching concept of the land, meaning the state, society, is over everything. It has power. It literally, Yitron means it overwhelms everything. Yitron eretz bakol hu. The idea of eretz, of the land, covers everything. And in that situation, melech l'sadeh ne'avad. The king is a slave to the field. Okay? So again, the idea of land, of eretz, covers everything. And even a king is also a slave to the land. And that means to say that in that case, in that sense, he means to say that when you come to a situation where the society is breaking, there's some breakdown in society, some systemic societal issue. So in that case, it ends up being the overriding matter. It takes over everything. Again, so in our local elections, Portland, the number one question on the ballot right now is how do we handle or how do we deal with homelessness? Do we take care of it? Do we kick them all? Get the police involved? Do we get social workers involved? That's the question. And everybody has to answer that question. At every point in time in history, there's going to be one question where that's going to be the one thing that everybody has to contend with. And that is where all the power is focused. That is where that is the thing that's going to decide every matter, to the point where when you have something like that, so we have this idea of eretz, this land. So and I'm using land as meaning the issue of the day, so to speak, land. Okay, that's the world we live in, so to speak. So when that happens, the king himself becomes subject to this issue. And so in that idea, the king is, even the king, who we would assume that a king is basically all powerful. A king has no one above them that they could pass the buck to. Well, they could still figure out a way. They could still weasel their way out of it and say, we really have to focus on the one issue at hand right now. Right? They say, I'm sorry, we're tied up. We're subservient to this field right now. Again, in the bigger general sense of the land. So I'm stuck. I'm serving this field right now. And that becomes the one issue that takes over everything. So, if there's an economic issue, so that's it. Human rights go out the window, or there's a health issue, some other economy goes out. Something like even the king, even the most, so to speak, most powerful person in the country is able to say, I'm tied up with this right now, and I can't deal with anything else. And so there's still a way. There's still a way for even the king to pass the buck, to avoid responsibility for something. And so again, the oppression to the underprivileged, that's probably going to end up on the bottom of the list when something else is a bigger issue. When we got a country to run, right? So we can't take care of these people, or we gotta, there's too much to handle, and therefore, it's not like even the king can shirk the responsibility for that and say, oh, then that's I have a minister for that, and that minister gets to say, oh, I've got somebody else for that, and that guy gets to say, oh, really? We have the minister for that. The minister gets to say, I have the king for that, right? So in the end of the day, nothing gets done, and we know this. We've seen this a million times in whenever you have a bureaucracy, that things just don't get done. Okay, it's an amazing thing, and it's a terrible thing, and it's an amazing thing and a terrible thing. So, but it continues to happen over and over again, and he says, don't be surprised when you see that. That's just the reality of the thing. That's the reality of life. Is that people will constantly be passing that on to somebody else, whether they have somebody above them that they could pass it on to, or whether they're the highest and they can say, I don't have time for that. Right? Either way, there's a way to shirk the responsibility for that, for whatever action needs to be taken care of. Again, in this case, the underprivileged. Hey, they're underprivileged for a reason, right? No one's taking care of them. So that's what's happening over here. And then but really we have to understand, fine, this is going on. We find that there's oppression going on. People are shirking their responsibility. What is it that's motivating that? Why doesn't anybody actually want to take care of it? You have people who that's their job. They got voted, let's say in our case, we have people who are voted in for the explicit reason that that they're there to take care of this, right? Not to get political at all, and not to say one side of the debate or another. But a major part of President Biden getting voted into office was his promise to take care of, or to eliminate student debt. That was definitely part of his promises. I know that a lot of people my age, that's why they voted for him. Okay, I'm not saying whether that's right, whether that's wrong, whether he should, whether he shouldn't, totally avoiding that discussion. But nothing's been done about that. So whether it's right or wrong, it was a campaign promise that's totally just fallen by the wayside. Again, I'm avoiding politics. I'm just saying, here you have another case where that's a visible case where something was promised to get done. You have people who are waiting for it to get done, or people who are arguing that it shouldn't get done, and still just nothing's happening about it. Not even a debate. There's just nothing happening about it. So in that case, that's where again you see you can always pass the buck. Oh, we're dealing with COVID. Oh, we're dealing with something else. Oh, we're dealing with, there's always something to be dealing with when you need to avoid an issue. And I'm sure both sides of the aisle will run on that same platform next election. That's just how it works. So what's the motivating factor? Why not get stuff done? That's really the question. You're in a position of power, right? Let's say you do have the ability with a stroke of a pen to get rid of student debt, right? So why not do it? And that's what he starts to talk about in this next verse over here. And that is verse number 9. And he says, Ohev kesef, somebody who loves money, lo yispa kesef, will never be satisfied with money. Umi ohev behamon, and somebody who loves a large quantities of things, loves to have just a bunch of stuff, lo tevua, will not have grain, will not have the basic staples that they need. Gam zahavel, and that again is another case of hevel. Okay, something that perhaps there's something we could gain from it. There might be a lesson there, but in general, it's pretty silly, and it's a terrible terrible reality of life. So this is the motivating factor right here. When you love money, you're never going to be satisfied by it, right? We've seen this. Why do politicians want to be politicians? It pays. It's great. It's a great life. It's much better to be a politician than to not be a politician. So you can promise from here to tomorrow. You could say you're working on one thing or another. You can always pass the buck, because it's very important that as long as you keep on getting that kesef, as long as you keep on getting that money, as long as you keep on getting that government pension, that government paycheck, as long as you have power, money is power in this case, right? The idea of money over here is also an idea of power. Somebody who loves money, somebody who loves control, who loves power, is never going to be satisfied by it. So you give somebody, even the most honest person, the person who wants to go and actually they're driven to go and fix this issue, the systemic societal issue. You say, here, have a little power, you take care of it. It never stops there. Because somebody who loves money, who loves power, will never be satisfied with it. As an aside, he throws in not only that, somebody who loves the finer things will end up falling and end up end up in a situation where they won't even have the basic staples. We'll have to discuss next week why he throws that in here, if it's not really seemingly related to what we're talking about over here. We're out of time, so